Most policemen and UDR soldiers who took the law into their own hands lived in country areas where they were seen as soft targets by the IRA. William McCaughey joined the RUC to defend Ulster, but in frustration he sought to hit back.
It was a combination of a feeling that the state was not responding adequately, and I suppose a perfectly human desire for revenge against those or against that community which had killed my friends.
McCaughey was also a member of the loyalist paramilitary group the UVF. In this guise he took his revenge. The target was a Catholic who ran a corner shop in the village of Ahohill. The assassins knocked at his door in the middle of the night and gunned him down. The RUC said the victim was a law-abiding citizen. McCaughey thought otherwise. When you were going to kill the individual concerned, didn't it occur to you that you were a policeman? Didn't you say to yourself, what am I doing here, a member of the Royal Ulster Constabulary going out to kill somebody?
No, to be perfectly honest, the fact that I was a member of the RUC didn't enter my mind at all. I went there as an Ulster loyalist in defence of the state of Northern Ireland. That was my only consideration and motivation.
McCaughey was a member of a 30-strong special police unit based in Armagh. He wasn't the only one involved in terrorist activity. How many members of the unit were arrested? How many of the 30, roughly?
I think there was 10 arrested and 6 charged.
And how many found guilty?
6.
Of serious crime?
Yeah.
From murder to bombing to kidnapping?
Yes.
Didn't the conviction of Sergeant William McCaughey and half a dozen of his police colleagues indicate that there was collusion between the police and the loyalist paramilitaries in the late 70s?
Well, you see, again, in terms of allegations of collusion, the allegation is that this is systemic, that this is organisational.
But in the case of Sergeant McCaughey, he was a policeman, he was a member of the UVF, he was convicted of murder.
I think you have to look at how the activities of such people are investigated. Is there any tolerance of that, or is there absolute rigorous intolerance? And I think the latter applies so far as the RUC is concerned. Wherever it has had such people, it has acted rigorously to root them out and bring them to justice.
McCaughey served a life sentence for murder inside the Maze prison. Here, like all Loyalist and Republican inmates, he was treated as a common criminal. Government policy had changed. Since the early 70s, all prisoners had enjoyed a special status, which, to their minds, recognised they were prisoners of war. But before McCaughey was sentenced, the status was abolished, and the government insisted that all prisoners were criminals. During his time in jail, McCaughey found the Lord and repented of what he had done. But he still maintained that he'd been defending Ulster and therefore wasn't a criminal.
These were criminal activities, not merely by the IRA, but also increasingly by the Loyalists. And they should have been dealt with under the criminal law. It's the whole basis of a democracy. You can't have any other basis other than locking people up by due legal process.
But the IRA argued that they weren't criminals, that they were fighting a political war to get the British out of Northern Ireland. They resented being called criminals.
Well, I'm afraid I don't agree with that, and I never have agreed with that.
The government refused to give in. To do so would have left its new policy in ruins. IRA prisoners then escalated their protest with the weapon of last resort, the hunger strike. 7 IRA prisoners refused food for weeks on end. Whitehall officials faced a dreadful dilemma.
First of all, force feeding was out. Therefore, if the hunger strike continued, these people would die. Therefore, we would have more martyrs. And Northern Ireland is not a place to grow martyrs if you can avoid it. Therefore, we were very anxious to try to find some way of enabling the hunger strikers to get off their hook.
If a compromise were to be found, it would have to be devised in the utmost secrecy. In public, the Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher, was adamant that there would be no concessions. In private, things were once again moving behind the scenes. The mover was the MI6 officer Michael Oatley, who'd helped negotiate the IRA ceasefire 5 years earlier. He re-emerged from the shadows as several of the prisoners neared death. His link to the IRA was via a friend in Derry. The IRA wanted the issue resolved.
I was rung up by a friend who said, "This is the situation, I think we can do something with it." As usual, the telephone call came at 1 or 2 in the morning. We spent 2 or 3 hours discussing the situation in veiled language over the telephone. I produced a set of proposals as to how the matter might be managed with a formula, and went the following morning with it to the Northern Ireland office.
I got the authority of ministers to proceed with this course of action. Went downstairs, put Michael Oatley in my car. He was driven at speed to London Airport, put on the shuttle to Belfast, and met at the other end, all within the space of a very few hours. And it was accomplished.
Did you clear it with the Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher?
Yes.
And what did she say?
She approved.
Death was now close. The leader, Brendan Hughes, seen here, had gone without food for over 50 days.
The priest was asked to go to Belfast International Airport, I believe, and there he would meet a person with a red carnation. I laughed the night the priest told me this, sitting in the prison, and the priest duly went to the airport, and lo and behold, this guy with a red carnation passed by and passed the document over to Father Brendan.
Oatley had brought revised prison rules, which, to the IRA, were capable of liberal interpretation.
I sincerely believed, but it was a status that we could work with, and we could end this thing. I believed that then, yeah.
Remarkably, Oatley seemed to have ended the hunger strike without loss of face. The prisoners' clothes arrived at the maze, but would they be allowed to put them on? The climax of the epic confrontation was still to come. One of the prisoners' most vociferous champions was Bernadette McCalliskey, still known to many as Bernadette Devlin. What happened to her raised even more questions about the SAS.
And if Britain lets one man or woman die in those prisons, she may well fan the same spark that burns today and has burned ever since in this country into one more flame of resistance that will free 32 counties and build a country we can all live in.
At this critical time, Bernadette McCalliskey was top of the Loyalists' hate list. What did she represent to you as a person?
Detestable bits.
What did you set out to do?
To take her out, to kill her.
This Loyalist was sentenced to 20 years for attempted murder. He asked us to conceal his identity. Bernadette McCalliskey lived with her husband Michael and their children in a remote bungalow outside Dungannon. The Loyalist hit squad planned to bring down the telephone line that was their only contact with the outside world. The attack came at breakfast time.
We drove for about 45 minutes to a place where she lived. It was a very bad morning. Snow, sleet, rain, very dark. Got to the house, 2 of us went into the house and the driver stayed outside. His job was to pull the telephone wires down. We went in to the house. That's what we had to do in the house.
How did you get into the house?
We had a sledge, but it wasn't used. The door was kicked in.
Did you shoot?
I did, yeah.
How many shots?
5.
At whom?
At both.
Did you hit them?
Yeah.
Did you think you killed them?
Yeah, I did.
What the loyalist UFF did not know was that there was intelligence on the attack and the SAS had been deployed to the scene.
When we come out, the first thing I heard was shouts, British security forces, drop your arms.